How's it going, everyone? And welcome to another Game Explain discussion here on, you guessed it, Game Explain. And I am joined by my fellow Metroid comrades, Rob of Rule of True Review and SuperMetalDave, because we're going to talk about Metroid Prime 4 and the fact that it's been 2 years since the announcement of the delay. The delay probably happened earlier than that, but we only heard about it on the fateful day of January 25th, 2019. So tell me, guys, where were you when Metroid Prime 4 restarted development? We'll start with you, Rob.
Well, I was in bed, and I actually, I was asleep, and I had no idea this horrible news was coming my way, and I actually woke up that morning to a text from my younger brother who lives on the East Coast. I'm here on the West Coast of the States, and it was, I can't remember exactly, but it said something to like the effect of, "Oh no, that Metroid news," and a frowny face. And of course, that put the fear in my heart. I was like, what happened? And I got right online. I went right to the video that they posted, and I watched it. And like a lot of us, maybe for the first 30 seconds or minute or so, I think we all had the fear that he was going to tell us the game was canceled outright.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, we all had
God.
that. And luckily, he said, oh, it's delayed in the Retro Studios and the whole news. So that's what happened. I was asleep, having great, wonderful Samus dreams, and then I woke up to crushing news.
What about you, Dave? I'm pretty sure all our answers are kind of the same because we're all on the same time zone.
Yeah, for me it was like I woke up. I remember very, very clearly. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. because I was getting ready for work that day, and oh wow, Metroid Prime 4 update! Oh my goodness! And then of course it can't be good news though, right? Because it didn't. You've seen a message from like one of the guys at Nintendo, not from Retro Studios or anything like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
And yeah. At first, I was optimistic, and then I was like, "Oh no, is the game actually canceled completely? Like, this is not good." And then, of course, they said they're gonna restart development from scratch, and my immediate reaction was just like devastation, just like so like, and just sadness, you know, like just really sad way to start your day, seeing that, and then. Of course, the reactions online, people freaking out, and all the reaction videos and everything. I was just like, oh man, it was just really sad. I remember, and then all the feelings that came with that. After that, you get like start asking questions like, why wasn't it with Retro Studios in the first place? You go on from there and jump to all these conclusions, and it's just a really crazy, like emotional day for Metroid fans.
Yeah, I just pictured you like starting your day off with that news, and then it's like. Just a montage of your day just with the same sad expression, like brushing your teeth, driving to work.
Sad music playing in the background.
Yes, exactly. All around me are familiar faces.
Oh, man.
Something like that.
We all felt that.
Yeah, I woke up that day. At the time, I was working for Commonwealth Realm, and Conrad sent me a message saying, Joseph, react to this. You gotta just wake up and react to this. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not gonna react to this. Second of all, oh no, please God, don't make this game canceled, whatever you do. And it's just like the only slight bit of joy I got watching that development update was seeing the Retro Studios logo. But other than that, I was just completely devastated the entire day. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if the game title is going to be Metroid Prime 4 Devastation, because that's how devastating it was. Like,
it's so fitting.
It is. It really is. And yeah, I didn't want to get out of bed. Like, I was just like this.
Well, I will say for myself, as I kind of sat with the news, like we all had to sit with the news for the first like few hours after that video went up, and then the next days and weeks, and then 2 years later to today. But for myself, pretty early on in the first couple of days or so, I really quickly came around to it sort of becoming good news, right? I think I've discussed it so much like on my own channel and plenty of conversations I've had. Maybe, sounds like we maybe all feel the same, that initially the surprise and the shock was just so crushing. But the more you really think on it, the more you realize this has to be a good thing, because they basically came right out in a very un-Nintendo way, I would say. They came out and said, hey, the game we were making was bad. It just wasn't a good game, you guys. So instead, we're going to just make a better game. So it's going to suck. You're going to wait. And we're sorry to do it, but we're giving it to these guys we trust called Retro Studios. You might have heard of them. And we're just going to make the better game because what we were making wasn't going to make you guys happy. And so even though it was hard, I think, for us to parse through our feelings when it was new news, But I really, for myself, came around pretty quickly to it being good news. I don't know if any of you guys felt the same at all, or...
Yeah, for me, I was really actually concerned about the game in the first place due to the rumors of the development, already before that with the whole Bandai Namco thing, and there was some talk of, I think there was some talk of like a third person's perspective. I remember that being a rumor a little bit there too. But maybe playing a part in it a little bit. I was kind of worried about that game as far as because ever since they said it wasn't going to be Retro Studios, I was like, I don't know about this. So that there was kind of like that relief that it wasn't going to be ruined. But then, of course, the devastation of it being delayed. So you had like those two feelings going on at the same time. Like I was looking forward to this game coming, like maybe this year in 2019, and then for it to be just ripped away from us like that. But then, of course, you look back on it and say, well, it's going to Retro Studios, so that is actually a good thing. The problem now is, though, just waiting to see anything about this game at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I'm kind of just like, I don't think I've fully forgiven Nintendo yet, to be honest. I know that sounds salty, but it's just like I'm not gonna be happy with this decision until like I see something of this game, and then I'll be like, thank you, because I know what I'm gonna see, I'm gonna love, because Nintendo was very transparent with the sharing this news with us, which was a very good thing. I'm not gonna deny that, but the question that'll always come back to me is, why didn't you give this to Retro back in like when you started making this game?
Exactly.
And that could have been because Retro didn't want it at first, because they were working on whatever the heck it is that's probably canceled now. So that probably had something to do with it. But yeah, in the end, it's just like you should have given this to Retro from the start, in my opinion. So yeah, it sucks. We could have had this game by now if only they did that, but it's comforting to know that it's been 2 years since the development restarted, so we're 2 years closer to Metroid Prime 4 than we were back when the game was delayed. So now that we know Retro has been under a microscope now for 2 years.
Yes, they have.
Let's be honest.
Yes, they have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Big time.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the employees who just got hired there are like, why are people writing articles about me?
Yeah, I'm so not important, but there's
you.
19 YouTube videos about me.
Exactly. I like to think like the first guy I remember hearing about was Kyle Heffley, who worked at 343 on Halo. And I like to think he saw all these news and articles about himself, and he was just like, wow, okay. I wasn't expecting this much exposure, but yeah, I wonder if that kind of makes them nervous, just knowing like, oh, all eyes are on this game. Like it is a big deal. This game. I actually think that's a pretty good point, but I would want to believe that most of them already know. I mean, Metroid is a very famous franchise, right? And I'm sure if you think about how long the franchise has been around, since the NES in 1985, 86, or sorry, 86 and 87. In Japan, US, respectively. Like, most developers nowadays probably grew up playing Metroid. And, most of them were growing up playing on the NES, and so were inspired by a game like that. So I would think, or at least I would hope, that someone coming over to this game who's already a developer understands, okay, it's a Metroid game, I'm working for a Nintendo company, this is such a huge deal. And I do think they think about that pressure, but someone coming from a Halo probably is pretty used to that, at least with that specific franchise, true.
Because it's just another titanic, legendary franchise that happens to also be first person, just like the Prime games are. So hopefully some of the nerves are steeled a little bit, but maybe when you think of some of the smaller tier people, like coming over from Gearbox and the Borderlands team, not to say anything bad about that, because I know those are great games, but the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the quality, but the importance or the impact of a Borderlands is definitely smaller than something like a Halo game. So with some of those folks, I wonder if they feel a little bit more pressure than someone used to working on like a Tomb Raider or a Call of Duty or a Halo, right?
Yeah.
Right.
My thought on that is that we've been following these guys getting hired since 2019. I think it was like mid 2019 they started doing the big hire spree of all these extremely talented, like top tier guys who work on like quadruple A, tier quality titles. And I think if I were one of those guys, I think I wouldn't be so nervous as long as I had a direction of where I was going with the project. So I think looking at what those guys are hired for, they all have very specific types of things they're working on the game. So I would be like more excited if I were them to be like, yeah, let's make this game great and let's just do the best we possibly can. And then Retro Studios, the guys in the higher ups there, should have an idea, you know, of where they want to take this game. If they don't, we're in trouble, right? But
Yeah.
but we want to know exactly where the game is going. Of course, that's what I would be thinking of as a developer. As long as we're clear on where we're taking this game, they can focus 100% on what their goal is for that certain part of the game, whether it be a leveled or a boss mechanic or, you know, the weapons or whatever gameplay aspect they have. As long as they do that, I think they could. Each person makes, you know, the one singular game to be amazing.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And let's just hope development on this game goes smoother than it did for, like, any of the Prime Trilogy games. Because some people don't know just how incredibly messy of a development cycle Metroid Prime 1 and even 2 have had. But mostly Prime 1.
Yeah, Prime 1.
Because, Prime 1 was just insane. Like, there's a whole Polygon article written about it. If you haven't read it, like, go read it. It's wild, man. But that makes me wonder also, like, kind of just what do we think their vision is for Metroid Prime 4? Do we think they're really just sort of expanding on the general conventions of Metroid, where it's like it's not an open world game, but it's sort of linear but not linear. It's a Metroidvania. Hey, by the way, there's a whole genre based named Metroid
that they basically created. Yeah.
Or do we think they're gonna get a little weird with it? They're going to maybe try and Breath of the Wild it by just maybe not necessarily making it open world, but really trying to reinvent Metroid. Do we think that's what they're going to try to do here? Or do we think they're going to play it a little safe and kind of just expand upon what made Metroid in the first place? And I want to hear what you think, Dave.
I think they're going to not go the Breath of the Wild thing because they just don't have the backbone, so to speak, of the last, like, you know, the last big Metroid game was Metroid Other M, so that was 11 years ago now. They had the Federation Force fiasco, and so I don't think they have the latitude really to like try to reinvent it again. I think what they should do is kind of expand upon or the ideas that worked from Metroid Prime 3 and maybe even take away some of the things that didn't work in Metroid Prime 3. And then further expand upon the things that worked really well in Metroid Prime 1 and 2, and just expand on that. Maybe not necessarily an open world game, but maybe more expansive environments inside, you know, like the certain maps you go to. That could work really well. Like they did that really well in games like God of War 2018. Like that wasn't an open world game per se, but it was very open feeling, but you did have very enclosed environments as well at the same time. They could go that route. And of course, they could also put a little bit more narrative into it as well, while still having the isolation aspects while you're actually doing gameplay. I think they could do that, and they're hinting at doing that in what they're hiring as well in the game too, from what they've been hiring for, adding emotional story dialogue and things like that. So I think they can do that, but I honestly don't think they're going to stray way too far away and reinvent the entire Metroid Prime series from scratch.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on there. What do you think, Rob?
Well, so to me, this is actually a really big question. I've thought about this a ton. I've had a lot of questions like thrown at me in my videos and live streams I've even done talking about Metroid. Like, how far will they go, right? Like, how much will they change it is kind of the nature of the question. And I think that in the Switch era, it seems like a lot of us are willing to believe that this is the time where Nintendo seems most willing to experiment with some of their franchises. And Breath of the Wild, which you guys brought up, is like the perfect comparison. I'm sort of two minds with it. I know for myself, I don't really want them to do too much changing to the Prime formula. Because it's a Prime game. You know, that's sort of been the argument that I've had against the idea. A lot of people say, oh, it's time for them to really change it up. They have to make it totally different and just, you know, go wacky with it, kind of like you said, Joey. And they need to do a Breath of the Wild thing. And I'm like, well, I don't know that they need to do it for a Metroid Prime 4, because it's a number 4, which means it has to kind of feel in line with, like, the first 3 games that came before it. I do think that maybe Metroid as a franchise could be a little bit more open to some big changes going forward, and my preference would be for them to do it after Metroid Prime 4. You know, hopefully Prime 4 comes out and is amazing and it sells like crazy and we love it, and it's just the perfect end to that, and then Metroid starts going in some kookier directions, and that would be fine. For Prime 4, I don't really want those big changes, and I definitely think that there's a chance that they're trying to do that with this game, but I think I'm going to more err on the side of them I don't want to say playing it safe, because that's not what they do with Metroid, but more just staying consistent, right? I think that they can evolve certain aspects of the game, and how is the story told, and what, is it maybe a little bit more open than it's been previously, and the more new weapons and upgrades and abilities they give Samus, the more the gameplay evolves just kind of naturally, right? But changing the whole formula and making it go from like a Twilight Princess into a Breath of the Wild, that kind of a change, I just don't know if I see them doing that with Prime 4, just because it is number 4, and I feel like it has to feel like the games before it,
That's very true.
Yeah.
And Zelda could get away with that better because it's a huge selling franchise, and they could get a little risky there. I feel like you could argue like you could take a lot of risks with Metroid Prime 4 and that could work out in his favor, but also, even though we talk about how legendary and how iconic of a franchise Metroid is, it doesn't sell as well as other Nintendo franchises, which just boggles my mind to this day still. It's just like, how can you have something so well respected and so influential just not even sell as well? They don't sell bad. They still sell in the millions.
That's
at
true.
least
That is true.
Most of the games.
Yeah.
But it's like we talk about playing it safe. The safe bet would be to not make a Metroid game and make another Zelda game. But at this exactly. But in this case, we know that anything that comes out on the Switch is a guaranteed success at this point. Just about most games. Even Pikmin 3 Deluxe did really well in Japan. I think it was the best-selling Pikmin game in Japan, at least. And maybe Metroid Prime 4 could breathe new life into the series by like getting people interested into this franchise. First, you got to release the Prime Trilogy on Switch. You got it. You just have to.
Yep.
But then that also like raises the question on like, this game is taking a while.
Yeah.
But I also feel like the Switch's life cycle is going to be longer than we anticipated. We're also talking about rumors of a Switch Pro, which have been going on since the Switch even came out. So it's interesting to think about like what future platforms like Metroid Prime 4 is going to be on. It was announced for the Switch, so I feel like unless this game takes 10 years or something really goes wrong, like it's got to come out on Switch. But we also talk about the Switch Pro, but even if it did come out on a Switch Pro, it would probably still have to come out on the Switch itself, as Pro consoles usually do.
Well, I think that the game can work pretty well on the Switch because of how Metroid Prime is designed. They have to reintroduce the Metroid Prime series overall to people in the first place, which is not gonna, it's kind of hard to reinvent the entire wheel if you're going to try to reintroduce the entire series to gamers. So the way Metroid Prime works, though, is that you have these isolated environments that are closed off with those doors that has been for every single game has hidden the loading screens. Basically, that's your loading screen. So I do think they could get away with quite a bit of creative leeway on the Switch, the current Switch, and then of course they can always increase detail and resolution, frame rate on a more powerful Switch as well, and still make the game work on the original Switch because of the way Metroid Prime is as far as how it's designed. And as long as they stick to that format, I think it'll work just fine.
I agree. Yeah, and also they did that thing where if you're facing one way, like it doesn't render anything behind you as well, which I'm sure helped the horsepower on the GameCube a lot. So they're probably going to do the same thing there. And I think that's a common thing, too. Horizon Zero Dawn did it as well. So
I think the old God of War games, wasn't that the trick they used also on the PS2 and PS3?
Nice.
Yeah.
Also on Dolphin, if you guys ever tried Dolphin for like the GameCube version, or I think even Metroid Prime Trilogy, there's a certain mod you can do on Dolphin where you make it like zoom out the aspect ratio, you can actually see how the game loads when you turn your camera. So that's exactly how they did it.
Oh,
You can see
sweet.
the environment like disappear, and it's like, oh, that's how they did it. Yeah, it's so obvious. Like it's all like in front of you. Whatever you see is only what it loads. So as soon as you make a little turn, there's like a little like bounding box that makes the game like disappear from the your point of view on the sides, basically. So yeah,
It's a neat
there's
trick.
all kinds of tricks they can do, and also with Doom Eternal, I think they did that on the Switch, like panic button.
Oh,
I think that's how they did it. I watched the Digital Foundry video on how they did that game on PC and PS4, and they had like this whole like thing of how the engine works and how the game like doesn't load anything behind you. So it's like, yeah, that's one of the tricks they can use.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I'm sure they're going to do the same trick again, especially on the Switch. But like you said, they even use it on really powerful consoles, so I guess it's just a smart thing to do. But I'm not too much knowledgeable on game design, so I'm not going to try and make bold claims here on what they should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
That's going to be up to Retro to decide. So now that it's been 2 years since we know they restarted development, it's probably been longer, maybe 2 years and a few months. When is this game coming out? Like, I'm just gonna say it plainly, like ask it plainly. When do you think this game is coming out? Like, just season and year. Dave, what is your guess, or what is your biggest wish? Is when is this coming out?
I'm gonna say it's coming out fall time 2022.
I agree. That's kind of like my best case scenario prediction. Like, worst case, I don't even want to think about.
well, that's the 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why I say that is because I don't think the game was just started being delayed and passed on to Retro Studios in January 2019. I think they got it right before that. Of course, Nintendo didn't want to say anything during the Christmas time. So I really, really think the Retro Studios started working on this game in 2018. So I do think the end of 2022 will be when we get it.
Yeah, I hope we see it this year too. I know you made a video about that too, Rob.
I did actually, and I obviously agree with you guys. I think fall/holiday next year, 2022, makes a lot of sense. And as crazy as it is to think about, if you round generously in the right direction, that makes it still 2 years from now, right? Because we're January 2021, and that's like November 22, and it you can like trick yourself by saying, oh, that's only next year, but it's also like what 21 months from now or whatever. So
exactly.
But it just feels like that's the right time. And Dave, you bring up the point about when they probably started developing it before the delay in January 2019, and I definitely think that you're right, because if you guys remember, that's back when the 2018 Video Game Awards is when we all expected Metroid to have a presence, and it seemed like Reggie at the time and Jeff Keighley were trying to tease us with all this Metroid stuff and the T-shirts and the poses and just all these things, and we all believed that either the trilogy or Prime 4 or maybe even both were going to show up, that they were going to pull like what they did for Bayonetta. They were going to do the same thing for Metroid, where it's like, oh, we're bringing the Metroid Prime trilogy, here's a trailer, and everyone's excited, and then Reggie's like, oh, but we also have this, and then it's a trailer for Prime 4. And that didn't happen because only 1 month later, that delay was coming. And so, 99.9% chance Nintendo already knew during that December Game Awards that they were going to announce a delay of the game just, the following month in January. So, I mean, it's tough for us to say and predict when Retro officially was handed the game. Maybe we're lucky and it was like 6 months before that. Maybe it was during the summer of 2018, and they just waited so long to actually tell us. But it definitely is crazy. Regardless, I want to know what you guys think about this, because whether they started it in 2018 or they started in that during the time of the delay announcement in January, still 2 years later, the fact that Nintendo hasn't shown anything or even barely acknowledged it, if at all, I don't know when they would have acknowledged it publicly, it's really interesting that they've waited so long to really show or tell us anything, especially after they made the decision to even tell us about the delay in the first place. So I just don't know when we think they're going to do anything. I do predict, and Joey, you were kind of saying this too, you kind of teed me up this way, I do think we're going to see the game this year for that reason, because after 2 years, I mean, I don't care when you started it. If you've had it for 2 years, you have to have something that you can show. They've got something in a playable state that's a visual representation. of what this game is going to look like and play like. So I really believe they could give us a 30 or 40 second teaser of that game in 2021 and tell us it's coming next year. So I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think?
I agree.
Man, you're only asking for 30 or 40 seconds. My goodness, yeah.
That's all I need. If I just got 30 seconds, you guys, I'm telling you, I'd be so happy. I'd be like, great, thanks, Nintendo. I'll see you next year.
Yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions because we have these extremely strong, like really strong rumors now of its new hardware, and it's even showing up on the firmware stuff now as well for the Switch. So maybe, who knows, they're waiting to make a big bang and show it with new hardware and say it's coming down the Switch and it's new hardware, it's upgraded, you can see the improvements, blah, blah, blah. That would be one reason why they wouldn't show it, like even a screenshot of the game yet, in my opinion. Or they're waiting to show it the game when it's like really closer to being releasing, even maybe within a year or less than a year, so they may be waiting until E3 or something like that time frame of this year to show it. Who knows? Yeah. But those would be some reasons why. Like they want to really show a polished game and not something that's like having frame rate drops in the trailer and people are like, I don't know about this game. No, they want to show it like looking really good, I think.
Yeah, and that's also what kind of miffs me about Nintendo and just game development as a whole, because like Nintendo does like to wait. And sometimes they don't even announce games until like they're like really close to completion.
Yeah.
But then you have some exceptions like Bayonetta 3, like Shin Megami Tensei 5, and
Breath of the
kind
Wild.
Of just like wow, Breath of the Wild in general. Yes, exactly. And it's kind of just like dang. And Metroid Prime 4 is like a very special circumstance because not only did you announce this game in 2017. But you also announced its delay a year and a half later, and now that it's been 2 years, I really feel like, I don't want to say we're entitled to a trailer, because we're not entitled to anything, but it would be very nice if you, at least if you're not going to release a trailer, just give us the Prime trilogy this year, or something.
I get what you're saying, though, with the entitled comment, even though the word has a negative connotation, and so we don't want to feel entitled. But I think that maybe internally Nintendo thinks about it as in something could be owed, right? Because of the crazy rocky development and what they know they've put the Nintendo community through. And I think from that perspective, it feels less selfish and it feels less greedy or immature to be like, hey, show us, just 30 seconds or whatever. I do want to go to the release kind of structure of this game. I don't want to derail us too much, but I did have a thought I wanted to throw in. And you guys, maybe if you watch my videos enough, you've heard me say this, but I did want to add that I kind of have a slightly opposite theory on when the next-gen Nintendo console might arrive than what you had said, Joey, because you think the Switch might last for many years still, which it certainly could, don't get me wrong. I mean, that could happen. But I also feel like there's a good chance, maybe 50-50, that the next-gen machine is around the corner, potentially next year. So a theory I've long stated on many of my videos and live streams on my own channel for a long time now is that I think there's a great chance Metroid Prime 4 could be releasing. If it's fall or holiday 2022, I think there's a chance the next Nintendo console 2 years from now might actually be close to ready. So maybe Metroid Prime 4 gets a cross-gen release. And so, Dave, when you're talking about how great and powerful and beautiful it could look, and maybe Nintendo wants to wait until they're ready to show off the best version, it could be a Switch Pro that they're waiting for, but I kind of have a bit of my brain that tells me maybe a next-gen version would also be part of that. And that does include cross-gen. I absolutely believe that Nintendo wouldn't want to let go of the 100 million install base of the Nintendo Switch, so I'm sure they would pull a Breath of the Wild with it, if it's even a plan at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nintendo likes to upgrade their handhelds a lot. So like the DS had the DSi, 3DS had all kinds of upgrades, and they still released the Nintendo Switch after that too. So it's like, who knows? They could release 2 other consoles from now and then 2022, 2023, and
then next gen,
have it run on everything. Who knows? But it's just Nintendo wants to maximize their profits. So as long as they introduce something that is impressive, I think we all just want this game to look at the best it can possibly be. We don't want it to be limited or have it suffering in some way and have it being blamed on the hardware even. We don't want that either. We want it to be the best it can possibly be. So whatever they do, as long as it's the best benefit for the game, I'm all for.
Of course, yeah, and that thought's crossed my mind too, cross-gen, but it's also weird to think about cross-gen because, like, the Switch is a very unusual console because it's not just it's for one, it is of course a handheld / home console hybrid, but sales wise too, it's just
crazy.
It's wild that and it's like it's been hard to find a Switch like this entire year, partly because the pandemic and everyone's wanting to get this Switch because they're stuck at home, but two, it's because like when people buy a Switch, they have a whole bunch of games that they've never played before, like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey. Like to us, those games are old news, but to millions of people, it's going to be their new experience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Nintendo could potentially like squander momentum by announcing a brand new console soon, but at the same time, the hardware on the Switch is also due for an upgrade. I always wonder what console manufacturers, like how they plan for this, because I'm sure even the PS4 was selling a lot of units before the PS5 was even announced.
Yeah.
So
but my thought on that is that the Switch is a mobile device, so it's like if you think of it as in terms of like an iPhone or Samsung Galaxy, every single year they release a phone that is their next gen. That is their next gen console. Like every every year. So like the Switch, it could be viewed. They could release something like whatever they release. Say they release something this year. That could be their next-gen Switch, even though it's not called a next-gen Switch. It's because it's a brand new mobile processor or whatever it is, because it's a mobile device. Whatever they release, technically in mobile terms, would be like a next-gen device, even though they won't call it that. So there's one way to look at it.
Well, and I think it's also worth noting that if this wild theory of mine that the next-gen console would be coming out in holiday next year is actually true. When we talk about would it be too soon for them to announce it because it would kill the Switch's crazy momentum, I think that there's a case to be made that if it was going to release like in November next year, they could do the same thing they did with the Switch and only announce it a couple of months beforehand, which means even right now, that's 18 months in the future. So there's a long window between right now and January of 2021 and like maybe a July or an August of 2022. Like that's farther in the future than it really sounds when you just say, oh, next year. So that could also help the Switch continue its momentum. And it would still be a tricky thing. I mean, Joey, you bring up a really good point, like with Sony going from the crazy successful PS4 to announcing their next-gen machine. How do you balance that and keep that momentum, right? It is a hard thing. And I don't know if any of us actually have the answer, but I think that if a next-gen machine was late 22 or even early 23, to be fair, that there's still a long time before Nintendo could even have to talk about it or show it to us for the Switch's crazy momentum to continue. Maybe it even starts to wane a little bit sometime in 22. That obviously depends on how many games we're continuing to get for the console. And so, it is a wild theory. Like I said, it's definitely wild and it could be very wrong, but in my brain, I just match up the potential release windows of Prime 4 and that next-gen machine potentially being close to each other. And then, I don't know, Bob's your uncle. It just could really happen, and we get that next-gen kind of Metroid, how much hype would that generate, not only for like the next-gen machine, but also for Metroid? Because that's the thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We know how well things sell on the Switch, just like you said, Joey. So I really think the Switch is going to be sort of a saving grace for the franchise. And then if you just add in that extra layer of, but you can also wait 5 months and get the next-gen version that's going to look better when that comes out, and then more people might be that much more interested. And so it just could be good for the franchise,
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with software too. Like maybe they have all kinds of software that's waiting to be shown on this new console too, and we haven't seen there's a lot of ports that we keep seeing that on the Switch. We've not seen a lot of brand new games being shown right now. So a lot of it depends on what they want to show software wise. If they're waiting to make a big impression with new hardware, it's up to them. We don't know if we're going to see that this year or we're going to see it next year. We don't know. So it's like it's all depending on how they want to show the software in the best light, I think.
Yeah, and no other Nintendo franchise is better to do that with than Metroid. I mean, maybe Zelda, but Metroid
Absolutely.
is like visual masterpiece. Like I was just playing Metroid Prime on the GameCube over the weekend, and I'm just like, how does this game look so good?
Yeah. Good for you on the GameCube, too. I love it, man. I love those classic, goofy, stupid GameCube controls. Like, they're dumb, but I love them because I have such nostalgia for them, right? So
controller feels great.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great.
It really does. It makes me wonder, and that kind of goes into the final thing I want to discuss. like we did a discussion over the summer, last summer, about what we want to see in Metroid Prime 4. And for those of you who haven't seen it, you can check that out, link in the description. But I do want to end it off on like what's like the number one thing that you really want to see in Metroid Prime 4. And to make it easier for you guys, I'll go first. I do want to see kind of the customizable controls, but not like customizable controls in the sense of that, of like, oh, this button does this, but more like how, oh, if you want to play in the GameCube style, they have that option for you. Or if you want to play like a traditional first-person game style, there's that option for you. Or maybe we can even go the extra mile. This might be harder to pull off, but not impossible. If you want to play the game in third person or first person, that's also up to you. But then they'd have to design... Hot take, right? Because then they'd have to design the game to work in third and first person, so that's probably not going to happen. But I don't know. I'm just dreaming.
You want the?
You sound like a cyberpunk guy, but before they release it, hey, why can't have it in third person?
Oh man, when I was saying my prediction, I literally thought of the cyberpunk third person mod that looks hideous.
Oh, I haven't even seen it. I haven't seen that.
Oh. It's so good. Like like when the character zooms in, their head like gets severed off and like zoomed in. It's hilarious.
I'm not surprised at all. I had fun with the game, but I'm still not surprised to hear that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's game development. You got to find the tricks to do. But yeah, Rob, what's the first wish that comes to your head?
What I really want is a return to the larger real estate of walking space of Metroid Primes 1 and 2. And this, the podcast that we did that you mentioned, Joey, I talked about this on that one too. So I'm kind of rehashing some of those thoughts. But in Prime 3, the way they designed the actual maps and the areas and the layouts of all the different planets that Samus flies to and walks across, they're varied. So the environments are very different looking, but there really was, it just felt like there was less space and less terrain to walk across. The maps were much smaller and much more hallway focused than the first two games. And I really think that the first-person Prime games work best with those larger, more open areas. So it's not so much that I'm asking for like an open world game necessarily. It could sound like that, but it's not that I need the Breath of the Wild open thing. I just want them to return to the overall map design of those first two games. And part of that conversation is if we're flying to different planets or not. And again, I talked about this during that podcast too. I would be totally okay with just one humongous planet that Samus goes to that's just got a ton of different areas and environments. Yeah, because it would feel more like the first two games. And I don't think we need to fly between planets like we did in the third game. But whichever route they went, I would still be excited with the multiple planets thing. It just comes down to the map layout and the map design. I want less hallways and more open, airy areas that just give you a lot of huge vistas to look at and to find secrets, and you can walk to so many different nooks and crannies of these huge different rooms and areas you would go to. Prime 3 really didn't have that, and both Primes 1 and 2, I think, did a really good job with that. So my preference from a gameplay perspective would probably be that.
I think of the new Tomb Raider games. They did a really good job at giving you really open areas to explore. Those are like one of the best like modern AAA Metroidvanias like you could play. Like you should, if you're a Metroid fan, you haven't played them, do it yourself a favor.
They're great.
Jedi Fallen Order too.
Oh yes. Yeah, Jedi Fallen Order. Exactly. Yes.
So good.
So good. But yeah, Dave, what's your wish?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you guys said too, pretty much. I would like more meaningful and varied enemy encounters, like have enemies that do more, that are that affect your progression in the game, kind of like you know what I mean. Like, and they try to do that a little bit as far as how you attack them in Metroid Prime 3 using the grapple and things like that. But after playing so many games this past generation that have such well-designed enemy encounters, I think they can really take some of that in Metroid Prime 4 and put more attention to how you are fighting enemies besides just shooting them and just opening a door and that's it. There's got to be more they can do than just that. So I hope they do more varied variety in how you fight enemies.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so much I want, and there's so much we don't know. There's nothing we know, to be honest, except the title of this game.
That's
so
true.
Oh man. Yeah, I know we say it every year, but I hope we just see something this year.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned this in my video, my 2 years later video, but it's like I expect maybe the Game Awards. Would love to be wrong and love for it to be E3 season. Like I say E3 season because we don't even know if E3 is going to happen.
The
this
summer games season.
Yes, exactly.
That's
Sometime
my
this year.
prediction. I think if we see it, I think over the E3 summertime, I think there's a good chance that might be when they do it. You know.
I hope so too. I hope you're right because I don't want to wait until December.
Do you guys think the title will change? Like, will they add something to it?
I've been debating on if they were going to remove the 4 and give it a subtitle or just add a subtitle with the 4. That's what I'm wondering.
I think they'll add a subtitle, probably. Metroid Prime 4, Joey Ferris returns.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Joey Prime.
Let's just hope. Yes, let's just hope the title doesn't have last in it because we all know what happens to movies and games with the word last in the title. Metroid Prime 4, The Last of Us, part 4. But yeah, whatever.
The Last Bounty Hunter.
Metroid Prime 4,
Exactly.
Final Fantasy.
Metroid Prime 4, Final Fantasy, and Knuckles featuring Dante
Oh,
in the
no.
Devil May Cry series.
Oh, there you go. Win-win.
Yes,
Special
of course.
edition.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me on this discussion. But thank you guys so much for watching this discussion here on Metroid Prime 4. Tell us, what do you want to see from this game, and when do you think we're going to see it? When do you want to see it? Just go crazy in the comments. Let us know all your Metroid dreams and wishes. But until next time, thank you guys so much for watching. Click the videos to the right to find any other topics you might be interested in. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.